Welcome. Today we are in part 1 of the Love Safety Net DVD series, and we want to welcome you, and we are joined today by Love Safety Net experts Steve and Kim Cooper, coming all the way from Australia. Welcome, Steve and Kim.
Hi, Britt.
Hey, Britt. Nice to see you again.
Well, I'm so grateful that we were able to Skype you in from Australia. Of course, this DVD set will be utilized worldwide, so I guess the time difference doesn't matter, but it's been an adventure getting together at our 2 respective studios from Australia and the United States to bring your work into this 8-part DVD series that accompanies your workbook, the Love Safety Net Workbook, which is currently for sale on your website. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Well, fantastic.
Hard copy or a download?
Perfect. Good to know. And we have 2 websites, actually, that we'll be displaying for the audience throughout the show. One is stopthefights.com, and the other is thelovesafetynet.com, which goes along with your logo, which is a red, white, and blue life preserver. And I love that because you guys are like the superheroes of preserving troubled relationships. So thanks so much for being here. We just really value you being here and very excited for your work and all 8 parts of the show. The first 2 will accompany your first chapter in your book called A is for Attachment. So I'm going to start out by asking you to share with our audience a little bit about attachment, because it may seem very rudimentary, very simple, but tell us a little bit about the value of traditional attachment rituals.
Sure, I'd love to, Britt. Whether it's a family sitting around the table talking and sharing a meal together, or lovers feeding each other delicacies, or giving flowers, or exchanging rings, these attachment rituals they're universal, and they've really always been with us, and they're really the very fabric that I believe holds society together through keeping our healthy relationships with our family and with our community strong.
And those relationships, rituals move out into the community, not just in intimate relationships as well. Intimate relationships are very important to keep together, but there's also rituals that extend out into the community. For instance, I play Australian football, and in that game, the ball is a hot potato, so you always need to get rid of that ball. And you can't always see, so you rely on hearing your teammate, and your teammate's calling your name. And we train with that. We train for hours. Everyone needs to know each other's name. We need to be calling it out. Steve, Steve, Jimmy, 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 Steve, Steve, Steve. And that's all part of the game. It's the most important thing when we're coaching juniors. Got to know everyone's name. You've got to call it out, because that is really important. It's about your safety. If you've got the ball, it's a hot potato. You've got to get rid of it. So in the community I have with football, I know a lot of people, and I know a lot of people's names, of course. So that makes that social connection really strong. Being able to remember and know someone's name makes socializing that much easier, and it makes communicating so much easier. But it's not just football. I mean, I think, I remember in school we used to have a game called Who Stole the Cookie from the Cookie Jar? And you'd sit around and, we'd have to call each other's name. Michael stole the cookie from the cookie jar. And everyone would sit around and we'd all learn each other's name by doing it. So that real basic idea of knowing each other's name and being able to call it out is really powerful.
And that comes down to greeting as well, and using each other's names in greeting is probably the most basic ritual that we have with each other. One thing I really noticed early on when I got into this work, and it was something that I actually noticed I didn't learn from anyone, was that it seemed to be the more successful people were and the more popular people were, the more flamboyant and dramatic even they'd be about greeting other people and using their names greeting. They'd say, Steve, how you doing? And really throw their arms out and around each other. And these are the rituals that we go through and that we we work on all the time. They're very, very, very important to keeping relationships healthy and strong.
And we can forget to call the close people in our family. We can forget to say, Kim, nice to see you. You know, it's too easy to just say, hey, or hi.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to forget the power of calling each other's by name.
Wonderful. Well, that makes a lot of sense, and I agree. It does seem sometimes almost flamboyant or overdramatic when you watch very successful people greet one another. They really will say, Steve, how wonderful to see you, and really it makes you feel great, because a quote that I love, made a lot of sense to me, is people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And just by employing that simple greeting in a love relationship, which you talk a lot about marriages in your work, something that simple is so profound. And Kim, however it is you got to that in your Nancy Drew detective, I call it, work, it's just brilliant. I've seen it work in my own life with people in my own life. And you're right, Steve, not to just, hey, welcome home. Even that in an upbeat tone is different than saying the name. Hi, Bob. How are you? And it really works. And part of the reason, I could be wrong, but part of the reason seems to be that the troubled relationships that you address and have all these wonderful skills to teach people, to turn them around, really consist often of somebody trying to please an adult brat, as you put it in your work. So after a while of this consistent happy greeting, I would think they'd kind of start thinking, well, gosh, why are they still so thrilled to see me, you know, and maybe change the attitude. I don't know. And on the other hand, Kim, I would ask you, people that are now buying this DVD series, watching right now, who are dealing with a grumpy, angry partner, who might be saying, well, is this really going to help? And I know you, so you would say, well, try it. Don't just think about it. Do it for a while and with good expectation. But what if they say to you, well, how do I do that? Because they come home, they don't even look me in the eye. They won't even know if I'm saying welcome home. And what would you say to someone who's worried about that?
Well, it was uncomfortable for me at first. It wasn't something that came natural. It was something that I had to learn to do. And I guess any new habit sort of feels strange and unusual at first. So, you know, you try it in the beginning and you make it your own. You be as warm as you can be and what's appropriate in the situation. I mean, obviously, being too fake and cheesy isn't going to come across.
Right.
You know, you have to find your own style. But I do know definitely that for myself, you know, sometimes maybe I've been upset with somebody or angry at somebody. And then when I see them, if they greet me warmly and they use my name and they look really pleased to see me, suddenly, you know, it's pretty easy to sort of forget about maybe what you were upset about.
I see. Good one.
And it is very powerful, but it's not the complete answer to all of the problems either. It's really just it's a good habit to get into. And I think if you get anything from the books that Kim writes, it's you know, you have to start forming healthy habits, and this is a real basic one. And you have to practice it even if it is uncomfortable from time to time.
I understand. Well, I was reading Napoleon Hill last night speaking about habits, and they make or break your life. So even these simple, what seem very simple habits, really are a wonderful foundation that you offer people for success, and then we can build. So we'll build now to the next concept in the A is for attachment. Before we go show the audience a short clip about some things not to do. So Kim, why don't you just kind of give the audience an intro to this clip, because it's important in building attachment that there are some things people should stop doing that you talk about in your work.
Yeah, that's right. And that's really a big part of changing habits is that, you know, there's new things that you need to learn, but there's also things that you may have been doing that may have seemed like they made sense, but really they didn't. And this kind of unlearning, as we get further into this work, we'll talk about some of the brain chemicals, and unlearning is actually a very important part of us learning. Sometimes you have to unlearn old things to make space for new things.
Good point.
And so that's what this is about, really.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you help people ascertain what it is they need to unlearn, like the over-pleasing, doing too much. Today's society will tell you if you just, have a better mascara or whatever, or look more beautiful, you'll just change your relationships. And you're teaching people it's really not about cooking a better meal or getting a new hairdo. It's really about building healthy attachment.
That's right.
Good.
And it becomes a talent that you have, to be able to choose something nice from a shelf, like a nice cologne or a nice bottle of liquor. That's your tastes. But if you can build good habits, that's a talent. And your tastes should never override your talents. It should be the other way around.
I love that. And that's one reason I love hanging out with you guys, because I can see it modeled. And what I'm not getting always conceptually in my brain, I can see it, and humans really learn by being around something that they want to become like, and you guys really exemplify that. So hopefully that's very obvious to all of the folks watching the DVD series, because this was not always the case with you two, and we filmed a couple shows that we will be using as auxiliary shows at the end of the DVD series, as well as Kim just mentioned, talking about some brain chemistry that we'll also have as extra DVD special inserts in the series. But really, I just love hanging out with you guys, because I get to learn by watching you use the skills with each other. Because reading about them is great, but I tried that for quite some time, and it didn't work. So I'm just trying to make the transition now into actually utilizing them. So we're going to go to clip 1 now and share with our audience a couple ideas about what not to do to build attachment.
Hi, I'm Kim.
Hi, and I'm Steve.
I'm really glad that you found us today. We want to share some of the things that took our marriage from being one of the worst marriages on the planet to now perhaps one of the best. There's 3 things that I think people need to learn to stop doing, and I know this because they're things that I used to do all the time, but I think my natural instincts weren't really correct. I think maybe I was instinct impaired or something.
Well, they're understandable, I guess, but weren't really getting the outcomes you were looking for. Is that fair to say?
That's fair. So I want you to ask yourself if maybe you're doing these things too. The first is asking your partner to change and complaining a lot about the behavior that's upsetting you. I know that your partner may be being rude to you, and it's very tempting to think that you can talk to your partner and convince them that they really need to change this behavior, especially if you could show them how much this is hurting you. Now, I know that that seems the logical and tempting thing to do, but it really doesn't work, does it, Steve?
Doesn't really hit any of the right buttons, and what you want to do is get something moving forward in a positive sense, and unfortunately it just doesn't work.
Because if your partner has got to the stage where they're speaking disrespectfully to you and they're putting you down, they're not listening to you anyway, and you continuing to try and convince them that they need to change is really going to just make you look weak and make you look very low status, and probably just end up stereotyping you as, a complaining kind of nag, and really that's just going to make it easier for them to justify the bad things that they're doing.
And justify themselves that you're the problem.
Welcome back. Well, that was a pretty powerful clip. Kim, do you want to speak at all about those few items you introduced about what not to do?
Well, I think they're things that are pretty easy and natural for us to fall into, and I think they're not things that anyone should beat themselves up about if they're doing these things. You know, they seem logical at the time. If someone is behaving in a way that's upsetting you, and you're married to them, it's really quite natural to just want to ask them to change. But really, unfortunately, they just don't work, as we mentioned in the clip. And it's a matter of moving away from things that don't work and into things that do.
Excellent. Excellent. That's great. Steve, I've heard you talk about cooperating and becoming a team and just really learning how to put pettiness aside, which sounds very simple, but it was really profound when I was listening to you talk about that. So, Kim, I wanted to take this opportunity to ask you to share with our audience a bit about attachment being stronger with good dependence, kind of playing off of putting pettiness aside and discovering how to employ good dependence. Because the world tells us you don't want to be over-dependent, you don't want to be codependent, don't want to be this or that, and it really scares people from being interdependent, which your work kind of steers us towards.
Yes, I think that's right, and I think it's a very, very important point. I mean, it actually discouraged me from learning about codependence for many years, because I got the idea that they were saying it was wrong for you to depend on each other, and I wanted a relationship where I could depend on someone else. So when I did finally learn about it, I was very surprised to discover that really codependence is about emotional dependence. It's not healthy for us to depend on other people to make us happy and to help cheer us up and help regulate our emotions. But this doesn't mean that we can't depend on each other. You know, we really need to be able to depend on each other. It's healthy for a teenager to learn some independence, but by the time someone matures into adulthood, we really need to be learning to be trustworthy and dependable and able to move into interdependence, as you mentioned, Britt. And, we really do need to, I think that talking about the pettiness is important, because it's easy in a marriage to become sort of focused on you did this and I did this and who did what for whatever. And, I made this meal for you and you should have been home at this time for it. And rather than just letting people actually come to depend on us, I mean, the example I use in the workbook is I know parents with adult children who still do their laundry for their kids, and some people criticize them for that. But, those parents still have a bit more leverage, and it's a way that their kids come and visit them and that they keep their relationships attached and strong.
Well, that's a good point, because in today's society, well, you made several good points, but in today's society, we are not encouraged to have simple attachment rules. I mean, something as simple as sending flowers, as you mentioned, or back in when I was growing up, all of the fathers had, I won't say how many years that is, but all of the fathers had 8x10s of their wife and children on their desk at the office. I mean, something that
absolutely.
simple was wonderful.
And that really still should happen. It's very, very important, so that their family is with them at work, and so the fact that they're part of a family is displayed to their secretary and other people at their work.
Yes, and that they value their family, and to have to be away for 8-10 hours a time at a day, it's tough. So thank you so much for pointing that out. In the last 5 or 6 minutes that we have here, I'd like to make sure that we do cut to a shot of the cover of the workbook. So when you have a moment, if you could please bring up the Love Safety Net workbook. There we are. And almost wore my tiara today because there's a frog on that cover. And it talks about princesses, and it's a wonderful workbook. So we're just steering our audience toward the Love Safety Net workbook, because really out of all the books you've written, and you're such a prolific author, it is really the hands-on guerrilla warfare tool for very dangerous, possibly dangerous situation, emotionally dangerous, physically dangerous, some of these tough relationships that society has written off, and you guys have gone in there and found some things that most people give up before they get to that point, and you have found some fruit to help some folks in distress. And as Steve pointed out at the beginning, it is about safety too, you know. So all these tools increase safety within the relationship.
Very much. And I mean, but it really is like diet and exercise and putting good habits in place, healthy habits in place.
Good. Wonderful. Steve,
There's
did you have
also-
something to say?
Yeah, there's also, I think there's a lot of people talking about attachment these days. So it's very important to, I guess, clarify it a little bit. It is important not to go too far. You can't be a helicopter parent. I'm sure you've heard about that term before. You know, you hover over your children constantly, so that they're safe and so that they're looked after. And you know, there is an important role in letting kids, especially I'm talking about child rearing now, but it flows through into relationships as well. You can't overdo it as well. You've got to do it with quality. One of the things we do in our family is we play cards together, just simple card games. And that's just where we get a chance to just sit opposite each other. It's not about eating. It's not about negotiating. It's not about trying to get a little bit here and a little bit there or planning. Or it's not even about planning. It's just about spending some time. So even that's just very simple. It's just a way for us to connect. It's simple. It should be fun. It should be honoring everybody. So it is important to give it your quality attention, the way you attach with other people, not just doing it for the sake of doing it, because that can lead to damaging relationships in the end, because nobody wants that.
Very, very well put. And probably a lot of the tough relationships, the skills that they're employing, at some level they probably are trying to attach, and the only way they saw people attaching and connecting was screaming at each other, or some horrific manner of like, oh my goodness, you see this in the movies. A lot of people live that. And what you're saying about the cards is brilliant, and it's face-to-face time with the people you love, showing them what you talk about in your book. We only have a minute left here, so we can share about this on the next segment. But giving what you call good face, which is positive reinforcement and happy to be with you, spend time with you, playing cards. And now that I think about it, the most successful family that I know, that if I had to be reborn and do a family, I would love to be in this family. And their son, Gary, I get to take to lunch on occasion. They play marbles. And when I go to their house at night, that's the fun activity. And it is fun. And nobody's worried about someone manipulating or, you know, like you said, it's not a time for planning or anything like that. It's just quality time together and learning how to build attachment. Nobody throws anything. You know, it's just very, very sweet. It's just very sweet. I'm being a little flippant now. But you guys have come a long way. And in the next 7 segments, we hope to give a lot of your good research to people that are hurting out there, that have found you guys. And there's a lot of pain that can be averted by the good work you guys have done and are doing. And you've come a long way. I just keep repeating that because if people could see where you were and where you are now, they will know to hang on every word of your books, your advice, etc. So they are telling me to wrap up here in 30 seconds. So please leave our audience with something as lovely as you.
Well, thanks, Britt. We really look forward to talking to you more.
And we really want to get this strong connection with you, Britt, of course. This is all part of it. You know, this is part of our story. Now we're making this strong connection with you. It's really important and we're loving it.
Well, likewise, I'm loving it too, and I appreciate that about you guys. And that's another tip. You've got to appreciate people, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We couldn't do this without you. We need you. We're relying on you. We're depending on you.
Good. Well, it's interdependent then.
Absolutely.
All right, you guys. Thank you so much for joining us today. Part 1 of DVD, the Love Safety Net series. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks, Britt.
Bye.